Making a peace sign while having your photo taken could lead to a whole lot of trouble. Thieves could steal your fingerprints. That's according to Asao Ichizan, a professor at Japan's National Institute of Informatics.
If a fingerprint is stolen, if they're able to copy that fingerprint, fake ones can be produced. One can use it to assume another's identity, such as accessing a smartphone or breaking and entering into a restricted area, such as an apartment.
In an experiment, Ichizan showed how fingerprints can be stolen from a photograph taken with a high-resolution digital camera from up to 3 meters away. The copied fingerprints, Ichizan says, were a near 100% match.
We're the first in the world to use a commercial camera in extracting information based on fingerprints.
But a solution might be right at your fingertips. Biometric jammers, which are transparent film stickers made with nail art templates and white acrylic paint, may protect fingerprints from being copied. As of now, there is no evidence that hackers are using photographs to steal people's fingerprints, but the new technology could come in handy as fingerprints become used more often for shopping and security. The biometric jammers won't be available for commercial use for at least 2 years. Until then, when taking a photo, you may want to consider just wearing gloves.
To people everywhere!
To people everywhere!
We will not!
We will not!
Let our country!
Let our country!
Be run!
Be run!
By a bunch of billionaires! And bankers!
And bankers!
A large group of protesters have gathered outside of the Goldman Sachs headquarters in New York City on Tuesday to rally against Donald Trump's decision to pick several former executives of the Wall Street Bank for top jobs in his administration. As protesters unrolled green sleeping bags on the southwest corner of the building, Goldman Sachs security guards sent employees and guests to entrances on the north side. 50 or so protesters hold signs that say #GovernmentSachs and wear swamp monster masks in reference to Trump's pledge to drain the swamp. Goldman Sachs spokeswoman Tiffany Galvin said they respect every individual's rights to assembly and free speech. The group is intending to camp outside 200 West Street until Trump's inauguration on Friday.
Like gods descending from Mount Olympus, our nation's precious celebrities will take Manhattan to protest the inauguration. So leftists, if you're watching, it's this Thursday. So put it in your calendar next to chain self to tree and create a fake hate crime. So who's going to be there? The usual fools who protest on blind reflex while ignoring the inhumanity around them. They say Trump's sexist, homophobic, racist, while defending actual sexist, homophobes, and racists in the Islamo-fascist lands operating in plain view. Their outrage isn't fueled by real suffering, or else they'd bravely condemn jihadism. Mayor de Blasio is going to be there, which is good. Anything to keep that dumbass lurch from working. So is Mark Ruffalo. Doesn't this marble mouth do anything else? Now, I get the concern over Trump. He's prone to conspiracy. He's impulsively childlike. He's got a big ego. In a word, he's like you, the celebrity. That could explain your anger. He did it and you didn't. And now you cool kids are ignored, wondering why no one cares about what you say anymore. Like this Variety inauguration cover. Have you seen anything more self-important, more pretentious, more hilariously tone deaf? Look at Michael Moore. Oh, God, are you done throwing up? As for the so-called partisan divide, that cover shows you a uniformly liberal media establishment. And now they're a joke. Their worst suspicions have been realized. America tolerates you, but they don't take you seriously. So put those clown noses back on and make us laugh. That's all you're good for.
The North Dakota Army National Guard has deployed 2 surface-to-air missile launchers near a main work site for the Dakota Access Pipeline. Protesters saw one of the Avenger missile systems Monday and posted videos and photos to Facebook. North Dakota Guard spokesman William Prokopik said the missile tubes aren't loaded. He said, "These systems have observation capabilities and are used strictly in the observation role to protect private property and public safety. There's no authority to arm them." He said the 2 Avengers have been at the site of the drill pad for over a month without issue.
Despite Russian President Vladimir Putin's pledge late last month to withdraw some forces from Syria, Fox News has learned the opposite is taking place now. In the past 2 weeks, Russia has sent 24 T-55 battle tanks, 4 Su-25 attack jets, 15 housing units, and hundreds of artillery rounds into Syria. But Russia is not the only country deploying forces. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin has the latest from the Pentagon on what the U.S. military is sending to Europe.
It's the first time U.S. troops have been stationed in Norway since World War II. 300 U.S. Marines arrived Monday to begin winter training with a NATO ally that shares an Arctic border with Russia. Last week, 3,500 American soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division deployed to Poland to ease European allied concerns about Russian expansion. At the Atlantic Council today, in her last remarks as UN ambassador, Samantha Power accused Russia of tearing down the current world order.
For years, we have seen Russia take one aggressive and destabilizing action after another.
The U.S. could lift sanctions on Russia in exchange for a nuclear arms reduction deal. That's according to President-elect Donald Trump in his first interview with the British media ahead of his inauguration on Friday. Trump said, quote, "Let's see if we can make some good deals with Russia," adding that, in his opinion, nuclear weapons should be reduced. Well, RT's Anastasia Churkina reports with more from London.
This would certainly indicate quite a major shift in policy, considering the state of the relationship between the U.S. and Russia in these last years of the Obama administration. In fact, Trump has said that in exchange to a nuclear arms deal, the lifting of sanctions against Russia is a possibility. And this, of course, comes after last year Russia suspended nuclear cooperation with the U.S. because of the sanctions the United States had imposed against it. So that's something that's been announced by Trump. But of course, we have to remember that Obama in his day had talked about the so-called Перезагрузка, reset of ties, and this was something that was seen as a hopeful, positive step in the relationship between the two countries. So in this case, we'll have to wait and see if these promises are actually delivered.
In the last decade, women who use opioids have seen a sharp increase in pregnancies. This is a dramatic concern for infants born with opioid dependency stemming from their mother's use of heroin and prescription painkillers like Oxycontin and Vicodin. It is important for these future and current mothers and their children to live healthy and happy lives, and there are plenty of services that provide pregnant women with access to opioid use disorder treatment. Of the nearly 21,000 women who were pregnant when admitted for substance abuse treatment in 2012, 23% reported heroin use, while 28% reported using a non-heroin opioid. Special treatment programs for pregnant women aren't always easy to find. In fact, just 13% of outpatient-only substance abuse treatment facilities offer programs for pregnant women, and 13% of residential treatment facilities have such programs.
Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has praised the nuclear deal between Tehran and the P5+1 as a legal and political victory for the nation. Rouhani, who was speaking on the first anniversary of the implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, described the deal as a national achievement. He said that Iran proved to the world that it is not pursuing weapons of mass destruction and is only after peace and security in the region and the world. Rouhani said when Iran, all nuclear-related sanctions on Iran's oil, gas and energy sectors, as well as insurance and transportation, have been lifted. The Iranian president later rejected any possibility of renegotiating the nuclear deal under America's new administration. He said nothing will happen to the JCPOA because it is an international agreement, not a unilateral deal between Iran and the U.S.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has dismissed allegations that Moscow spied on U.S. President-elect Donald Trump back in 2013. Now, Putin said that Trump was not any kind of political figure when he traveled to Moscow, and that Russian special services had no reason to chase him. Last week, Trump also rejected the allegations as totally false. He never tried to use leverage with them and blamed the U.S. intelligence agencies for the reports. Two U.S. officials speaking on condition of anonymity said recently that U.S. intelligence agencies have informed Trump about reports that Russia has compromising personal and financial information about him.
Well, the Big Apple wants to keep tabs on just about anyone entering or leaving the city. New York City leaders want to create a database that can combine both license plate numbers and facial recognition. As you can imagine, not everyone's on board with the city's latest surveillance efforts. Here's RT's Trinity Chavez with this story.
In a city that already has a database on many residents, drivers, and non-residents, now New York City wants even more information about where you've been, where you're going, and who you're with. New York City has recently launched initiatives as part of the New York Crossing Project that would track anyone who is entering or leaving the city, including those in taxis, Ubers, and any other car services. The initiative will combine emerging technologies into the security design of bridges and tunnels across the state. At each crossing and at structurally sensitive points on bridges and tunnels, advanced cameras and sensors would be installed to read license plates and test emerging facial recognition software. The equipment would compare features like eyes, nose, cheekbones, and jaw with stored images to find matches. These technologies would be applied across airports and transit hubs to ultimately develop one system-wide plan. New York City Governor Cuomo said that this transformational project will revolutionize transportation in New York and ensure that our state is built to lead for generations to come. But many are concerned that by combining facial recognition and license plates with other databases like driver's license and property records is a complete invasion of privacy. New Yorkers, however, have mixed feelings.
Oh, definitely it's an invasion of privacy. I mean, you cannot go anywhere without cameras. Everywhere you go, it's cameras already. I think I'll be somewhat okay with it, but still privacy issues, I'm not too happy about that. So
you can't walk down the street without being recorded. So if law enforcement can make use of that, which they do, this just makes it more efficient.
It's just the way the world's going. It's sad we have to get to that point, isn't it?
The New York Crossing Project will also implement new tunnel barriers to control major floods and seismic measures on bridges, which will provide long-term protection from earthquakes and other natural forces. Funding for these improvements is a part of the MTA's $27 billion capital plan. Reporting in New York, Trinity Chavez, RT.
China's president says no one can win a trade war. That statement during today's World Economic Forum in Switzerland comes as many nations seek to defend free trade ahead of new policies in the incoming Trump administration. Correspondent Peter Ducey has more from outside Trump Tower in New York.
The next American president promises to get tough with China, and China's president doesn't know what to expect, but he knows what he doesn't want: a trade war with the U.S.
No one will emerge as the winner in a trade war.
Still, President-elect Donald Trump appears prepared to take aggressive action against China if necessary, because nearly half of the points on his website's trade policy page are about China, like labeling them a currency manipulator, bringing cases against them at the World Trade Organization, and eventually using every lawful presidential power to remedy trade disputes, especially concerning intellectual property theft. As a candidate, Mr. Trump used strong language to hint at a complete change in the way China does commerce with the U.S.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing.
Well, Donald Trump's inauguration is set for Friday, just days away. The closer it gets, the more we hear anti-Trump rhetoric surrounding his election. It's the rhetoric heard around the world as Russian President Vladimir Putin steps in, and he did not mince words. RT's Mirad Gazdiev explains from Moscow.
Donald Trump gets grilled and bugged endlessly about Vladimir Putin. The flip side here is that Vladimir Putin gets bugged in equal measure about Donald Trump. Still, the 20th is going to be a big day, the inauguration of the 45th president of the United States, and I mean big day. They're expecting crowds of as many as 1 million people during the inauguration and in the days afterwards, attending various rallies and protests. Donald Trump's election has been a polarizing event. A lot of people feel very strongly and want to voice their displeasure at him becoming president. And that's the fear. The concern here is that things might get out of hand. And this has happened before, recently, and that's what Vladimir Putin was getting at in one of his answers, reminding people about what happened in Kiev, in Ukraine, the violent revolution there.
Willingly or unwillingly, but those who are trying to undermine the U.S. president-elect's legitimacy are greatly harming U.S. interests. It seems like they trained in Kiev and are now ready to stage another Maidan in Washington with the aim of preventing Trump from taking office.
A large group of ISIS terrorists have launched an offensive against a key government-held airbase in Syria. The terrorists apparently came from Mosul, Iraq. That's where they had been fighting against a U.S.-led operation there. RT's Lizzie Phelan is in Syria for us tonight.
There's been very frightening developments in the eastern province of Deir ez-Zor near the Iraqi border in Syria over the last few days. ISIS have been making massive advances there, threatening the estimated 120,000 civilians that live in the last government-controlled part of Deir ez-Zor city that has been besieged now since 2014. They succeeded in cutting that last government-held patch of the city in two and severed the military airbase from the rest of the city. Now, that airbase is the only way that the Syrian government can deliver supplies to those trapped civilians and pro-government forces there. Now helicopters are unable to land in that airbase, unable to deliver food and medical supplies to civilians, and also unable to deliver reinforcements to pro-government forces there. So if the soldiers that are currently there don't manage to hold out, then ISIS will be able to overrun the city, and there's great fears that they will commit atrocities against the civilians that have been living under government rule there and against pro-government forces. Now, my team and I have had some contact with civilians and some pro-government fighters in Deir ez-Zor, and the conditions that they describe to us living under siege, they're extremely tough. They have very little food, many people surviving on canned food, a complete lack of fuel. There's only a handful of cars able to continue operating in Deir ez-Zor. Of course, now that's going to become even more difficult. Most people use bicycles, and of course they're living under constant ISIS shelling, and that shelling has been particularly bad over the last few days. This is the fiercest ISIS offensive that we've seen.
A senior Iranian military official has confirmed that anti-aircraft guns opened fire on a quadcopter over the capital, Tehran. According to Deputy Commander of the Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Base, the anti-aircraft guns fired at a flying object after it entered a no-flying zone in central Tehran. Brigadier General Ali Reza Elhami also said air defense units immediately stopped shooting after the quadcopter left the area. Elhami added, the artillery fire is a standard practice when an aircraft enters no-fly zone. The general noted the quadcopter was no serious threat and the situation has now returned to normal.
The many targets of the Republican-led Congress and the new president could very well be the United Nations. There is speculation that the U.S. may find a way to cut its massive donations to the world body amid new concerns over its latest anti-Israel stance. Senior correspondent Eric Shawn has that story tonight from New York.
When United States Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power abstained on the Security Council vote on Israeli settlements last month, it caused critics to question the role of the U.S. at the world body. While those on both sides of the aisle criticized the resolution, Republicans have raised the possibility of cutting UN funding. American taxpayers pay for roughly a quarter of the UN's budget, or, says the UN, about $10 billion a year to the whole system.
When do you see the United Nations solving problems? They don't. They cause problems. So if it lives up to the potential, it's a great thing, and if it doesn't, it's a waste of time and money.